Charlie, welcome to the Sarah's podcast.
Thank you very much.
So, for those that don't know you, it's a big industry. You are Charlie Collins, the owner of 2 Frydales fish and chip shops, one on Hinckley Road in Leicester, which is just Hinckley Road, Leicester. There's no other area to it.
No, well, it's called the West End of Leicester, but in the West End there's sort of 2 or 3 little parts. But it's easy. Everyone knows Hinckley Road because it goes through the whole of Leicester.
I think I've always probably referred to that area as it's not quite, but Leicester Forest East, I suppose.
Yeah, it's not Leicester Forest East. We're a little further down from there. No, but Hinckley Road.
You've got to go all the way down Narborough Road for that.
People know it as the sort of the Narborough Road area.
Yeah, I think that's probably more accurate, isn't it? Really, Narborough Road area, and then obviously you've got Syston, which is Frydales in the petrol station, which was McKay's, which is now Frydales.
Frydales, Syston.
And you are the current Dry White Young Fish Fryer of the year. So you could argue there's a lot that sort of happened in your, how long have you been in the industry? Since 16, 17?
Yeah. I started serving at 17 and then took over my first shop when I was 19. So I'm 25 now. So 6 years owning and 8 years just working.
So, what makes you go into the fish and chip game initially? Like, is it just a job? Is it just something to keep you going, or is it a plan?
To begin with, I was just working to earn a bit of money whilst I was doing my A levels. But then, as I got into it, I started to enjoy it, and it was at the time where they just put up university fees, and I was doing my A levels and sort of knew that I was sick of studying. I got into a couple of universities for business economics, but decided that I didn't want to. And at the time, the owner of the shop said, well, if we can find a way for you to do your degree whilst you work at the shop, like a business degree, then would you be willing to do it? And I said yes. And we found a course, and it was with the Peter Jones Foundation, the chap from Dragon's Den. And I could get a HND, which would then go on to a business degree in business management and entrepreneurship, I believe it was. So I did that for a couple of years, but it was a lot travelling down to London, and it was a bit of a pain. And at the same time that I was doing that, the gentleman who owned the shop, he had another coffee shop over in Oakham in Rutland, and they opened a Wetherspoons about 4 or 5 doors down from it, and it just sort of nosedived. So he had to spend all of his time there. I was managing the shop full time, so I made a proposition to rent it, and that's how I got into sort of owning my first shop.
And that the good thing about sort of renting a business like that, there's obviously negatives, but the positives are it's sort of easy to get into. You just it's a very low entry, low barrier. There's no sort of friction there. You can just say, look, I'll give you X amount a week. You carry on as you were.
Yes,
and
exactly. And nothing particularly changed for me because I was doing all the hours myself, short of getting the accountant and slowly learning the business side. I thought it was all very simple, but it wasn't. It was, managing staff and actually doing the books turns out to be not a difficult job, but a very time consuming job that I just wasn't used to. And there's so many more elements, and I didn't have a clue what a profit margin was and things like that.
we all struggle with that today. So what was the guy's name? I forgot. I do this every time because I always forget his name.
Jan.
Jan, that's it, Jan. And then he was business partners with Chris, but before that he worked for Chris, didn't he?
He worked with Chris in Melton when it was Windy Ridge.
The original.
And then Chris and Eleanor bought Andy's in Swaddling Coat, and Jan rented Andy's in Melton. And then they opened Frydales Hinckley Road together.
Okay. And is Jan involved in fish and chips these days?
No, he works in fashion.
Yeah. Okay, fair enough.
But yeah, goes all around the world selling fashion prints.
To be fair, he was always quite. I always found him a very good talker, very positive, like the way he was. So, like, yeah, I could see him being a good salesman in that respect.
He's been extremely helpful. He's helped me so much with fish and chips. Just got me into it and trained me to fry. It's really.
It's amazing. Like, 25 years old, 2 sites. You sort of think to yourself, where can you go? And I've always said to you, like, if you can make loads of mistakes now, as long as you learn from them, you'll be fine.
Yeah. All this has been a real eye opener.
So when did you then? So you're at the original site, Hinkley Road. How long before you then take on Syston? Syston was last year. So how many years was that in between?
So 4 years. Yeah, well, 4.5, 5 years. I think it was 4 years when they initially reached out and said we've got a site for sale, and then by the time it took about 12 months to complete. So it's a bit of a nightmare really taking over. But they reached out to me, which was really nice, because they wanted to get rid of the shop. They own petrol stations and opened a fish and chip shop inside of one, and thought it'd be a good idea. They thought they could have it staff managed, and it'd be a good way to be a little earner. But obviously, it turns out it's not. They said to me quite simply, when they come in the morning, they buy petrol in and sell it at a profit. He says, I'm coming into work and worrying whether my potatoes are good quality or whether my oil's in good quality. And he says, it's just too much headache.
Was this Simon?
Yeah.
Yeah. So we had a lot of conversations. Because I was quite involved with them when they were setting it up, and my cousin Barney was, and I was, and we were talking to them all the way through it. And I think they did sort of think that it would just be like stacking a shelf, like, and I think they quickly got rid of that idea pretty fast, because I believe the concept works. I just think that their idea of the concept was probably a bit misguided.
Yeah,
because they thought.
I think it's brilliant in the petrol station. It's sort of the main hub for the community. Everyone goes to that petrol station because it's the only one really local. So your passing trade through the village is incredible, and everyone knows where you are. And, it opens at 6 a.m, so you've got a good lunch trade, and then the evening trade's not quite as good as it perhaps could be in other shops, but it's even during this pandemic, people have still been coming out to it because people still and will always need petrol.
Yeah. One of the things I was thinking earlier when I was writing my notes is that I know Leicester quite well, a little bit. I spent a lot of time there when I was younger. My uncle had a shop. What was it? Braunston Gate, which isn't far from Narborough Road.
Right. That shop was a competitor of mine before it changed hands. It was
Mario's.
It's 500 meters down the road.
Yeah, and my uncle had it a long time ago. His son's moved on; he's in Lincolnshire, but I know the area quite well. And one thing I know about Leicestershire and Leicester itself is that the portions are quite hefty, and the prices are quite, let's say, competitive, to be polite. How do you navigate that? Like, you're trying you'd probably not have the margins you'd like, but you're no way near what the others are. Like, it must be a difficult thing to sort of work around.
Yeah, I mean, I try not to get into it too much, because I just know it's a losing battle. I wouldn't survive if I did those portions at those prices. I mean, a large fish in Leicester is around 12 to 14 ounces on a good day, and mine's 9 ounces, 9 to 10, and I'm generally more expensive than most shops in Leicester. In fact, I think I'm pretty much the most expensive, but I just try and trade on quality. And to be honest with you, I got it a little bit wrong. I put my prices up really high, and I'm still paying the price for that a little bit now. I just went on, right, I need to make 60% margin, and I annoyed a lot of customers who tried me, and just, especially with all the awards going on and things, a lot came out to try me and just went, oh, well, you're really expensive and I'm getting less food. It's nice, but that's not necessarily what my customer wants. So I've had to sort of hold my prices still for a while, where I'd like to put them up, but obviously can't. But we've built a reputation on quality. But my brand image in Leicester is seen as a little bit expensive, so I'm trying to change that slightly at the moment.
I think it's a difficult line to balance, though, because you want to show that you're value for money, But you do need to be dearer because obviously you've got a younger business, you've got more costs, you can argue you've got less costs in some areas. But then if you look at, let's say, probably the famous shop in Leicester, which is Grimsby Fisheries, well, I say famous because it's probably been there the longest in terms of, but I remember once I went there and they had a sign in the window saying the biggest portions in Leicestershire, and they promoted that. And I think that, and I think that's probably what's happened over the years is that everyone's tried to catch up with that.
Yeah, I mean, that's an extremely busy and good shop, and they're clearly doing something right because they do have queues out the door every single night. But I just, as a new business, I can't compete with that. I've got, and I'm not family run. It's just me. So I've got too many staff to do that, and I have to have managers, and I have to pay them well to keep them if I get a good member of staff. So it's tricky.
Do you think? What's your thoughts on shops generally like that? Prices have all gone up. Costs of sort of everything's going up. We've got PAYE to pay. You've got pensions. You've got everything. Is that just good? Can you see shops not being able to do that?
Yeah, I think now your turnover's got to be so high to manage that there's not that many shops that are going to be able to pull that off for that much longer. You've got to be doing some real numbers and having some real volume to do that. And with us becoming more of a cashless society, that's tightening it up even more for some shops. It's a ticking time bomb, really. I think,
especially for older shops, and I think what you're getting at there for older shops, that transition would throw them off a little bit.
I think the thing is, you might be able to survive, but you're not going. If you've not refitted in 20 years already, and you've not made enough money to refit, well, how's it going to be in 10 years' time when your margins are squeezed even more?
Yeah. Well, this is true. There's some shops that we see that they haven't got like an investment plan. They don't put, they don't, maybe fix up the tiles or the signage or whatever. Maybe they feel like it doesn't need it, but others probably do, and they feel like they're being squeezed. But I think this whole squeezing is going to keep going. I think that it's going to become more expensive to run a business. A fact. I think there's going to be a lot more red tape, a lot more legislation, a lot more sort of health regulation. I know one of my customers, he has a service on, he's a busy shop, he has a service on his range twice a year, and he has a duct clean twice a year. These are all costs that accumulate, that you can't put it on your gross profit, so I think that running the cost of running a business to be safer and more environmentally friendly or more locally friendly, all of these things just mount up.
Yeah, I mean, the cost in packaging, it all adds up, and it's not going away. That's the thing. It's only going in one direction. And if in the last 5 years we've had so much more to do, in the next 5 years we're probably going to have a lot more to do as well.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. I think you're right completely. So let's bring us up to the current sort of situation. You've got COVID-19. What are your first thoughts when let's say the poop hits the fan?
Yeah, well, my first thought was to close, and I was really worried. My staff were happy and willing to work. All credit to them, and it got to the point. I remember after Boris said to not go to restaurants, and then McDonald's closed. Well, especially when restaurants and pubs, he said not to go to restaurants and pubs. Everyone just seemed to come into my chip shop, it felt like, which was brilliant financially. But I was stood there and we had a queue out the shop down the street, and I was thinking, they're here for 15 minutes, 20 minutes waiting. And what's the difference between me and a pub right now? You could argue the time spent in there and they're not as close to each other and things like that. But at the time, I was just panicking that one of my staff could get ill or one of my customers could get ill, and I just did not want that on my conscience.
I think that one of the positive things with COVID, I'm trying to think, I'm trying to word it right, is that you talking about people catching it, you couldn't possibly say where you caught it. I think that's what I'm trying to sort of phrase here, is that you couldn't say I was in Charlie's shop or Stelios' business or his office and I caught COVID. I think you would have passed so many people from there to there that you could have caught it anywhere. So I think that's one good thing, and I think it would be really hard to litigate Like, so you'd argue that your staff couldn't say, well, I definitely caught it at Frydales.
Yeah,
well,
yeah,
how?
definitely.
Because you got the bus on the way here, and so there's a lot you could argue.
Yeah, but just because you could argue it doesn't mean it's the right decision to make.
No, I'm with you. Yeah. And I think what changed things in our industry, because I remember like there was a certain date, and I can't remember the dates right now, but I could find it. But it was the date that McDonald's said they were closing. Like that night, they said they were closing. All the fish and chip groups in the industry were lit. I mean, literally, it was, I'm closing. And it's almost like everyone's thought, well, yeah, the government's been slightly ambiguous here. They've left us, a lot of wiggle room. The minute McDonald's said it, it was like, no.
Well, if they... My thoughts were, if McDonald's can't possibly manage a safe way of operating, how on earth can I expect it? It just seemed like an impossible challenge at the time.
Yeah, no, it's true, and I think people don't probably give McDonald's enough credit. I think because they're going to come back now, and I guarantee you they will have amazing processes. It will be thought through, and will those processes fail sometimes? I'm sure they will, but for the most part, I think that they will do a great job.
Yeah, I think so as well. I think they're the standard that we need to be aiming for in terms of health and safety processes. It's
operationally.
Yeah. They've got that operations manual, and it's foolproof.
I find their product highly consistent, and I wouldn't say that I'd like to have that consistency as well. If I'm honest, I think that to turn out product like that time after time after time, I think that'd be amazing if we could do that. But still to the level we want, the quality we want. So, great quality fish and chips, just time after time after time. But as you know, there is just so many variables. You've got oil changes, potato changes, batter maybe fluctuates a little bit, well, especially during the shift, So it'd be amazing if we could say, we've got that perfectness.
Well, I think we're getting to a point where shops are able to get relatively close to that. I mean, we throw our batter. There's so many timers going off in my shop. It's endless. We throw the batter after an hour and a half every time. We cut the fish to certain sizes. That's probably one of the most difficult things to teach. Our oil, we use the testo with the high efficiency range. It barely drops temperature ever. It's we're getting to that point as an industry, I think, where we can achieve that, but it costs a lot of money to put those processes in place as well.
Again, it's just extra costs, isn't it?
Yeah, everything's extra costs at the minute.
I know the feeling. Did you put in a new range at Hinkley Road?
No. I was very, very close, and then closest to the point where as we locked down on the Monday, I signed a piece of paper on the Friday. And then on the Wednesday, I rang Paul and Vaz and was like, "Sorry, gents, it's just gonna have to wait."
I suppose, but I suppose now you can probably start talking about it again at some point, But I think you're right. I think a lot of the sort of long-term things just press hold for a minute, and you can relook.
Well, I think the thing was, I had a refit planned, and I was going to put seats in the shop. Well, that's definitely not the best option now. I need to spend a year trading again to see what we're going to come out with, because it's looking more likely at the moment that delivery is going to be a huge part of my business. Whereas before it was we were just concentrating on getting lunches busy, because the evenings have always been fine at Hinkley Road, but lunches have always been poor. So we thought, how can we get lunches busier? Well, let's put some seats in. But now it looks like we might not even open lunches and just concentrate on deliveries and click and collect in the evening, because we've took the volume from lunch and put it straight into the evenings at the moment. So we'll see.
If you can open less hours and do the same money, or at least close to the same money, it's not a bad thing, is it?
Yeah. Well, I've got Hinkley Road isn't doing what it was doing before lockdown, but Syston's doing more. So it's a strange one. I'm at around 90% of pre-lockdown turnover now, but Syston's around 30% up. So it's.
Do you think that's because of the petrol station? Do you think?
I think one reason is the petrol station, and two, Syston, people in Syston tend to have more disposable income than the people at Hinkley Road, as well as Hinkley Road's heavily dependent on students as well. When all the students have gone home, and we have football trade, and obviously there's no football at the moment.
the Syston is quite heavy in like workers.
Yeah. But they're not working necessarily at the minute. So, but the petrol station is still very busy.
Surely you get pucker pies for half price. You can walk there and collect them.
Yeah, well, I can collect them, but no, I'll get on my pucker.
Let's not talk about pucker because the groups will go off in a rage.
I know.
I don't, look, for me, I always say, when I see the comments about pucker pies, we've always bought pucker pies. Where there's a blip where we didn't, we tried something else. There's a good friend of mine, Kevin at Shire Foods, who's been on the podcast, and we tried them. Probably didn't implement them as well as we should have. But there's one thing I figured out, that actually customers like pucker pies.
Where I am, it's a staple. They employ
Leicestershire, mate.
From Leicester, and I count on one hand the amount of complaints I've had with pucker pies. But you see people reheating them the next day, and
I was going to say, like, you can't blame that.
Just like any other product, you wouldn't leave a sausage in the hot plate for 8 hours. So what? Why would you leave it? And everything still.
I remember I got to one shop once, and I won't name them obviously, but I got there at like 10 o'clock, and they were just taking it all out the chip box from the night before. They had like a load of sausages and stuff, and I was just like, I get it, I get why people do it, but you can't blame the sausage manufacturer for that. You can't say, they're no good anymore because they don't last 2 days.
Yeah.
But we had an
expectation that has to be met.
Yeah.
And yes, Pucker have changed some processes that might have changed their product slightly. But again, if you treat them the way that they tell you to, you 9 times out of 10 you're going to get a good product.
I've heard recently that the biggest change they've made is actually on the supermarket ones. They're not actually the same pie anymore. They're actually they've got less filler in them and less meat, because apparently they generally see an increase in sales when they're on a pound offer, and they realise that. So instead of giving them the same pie, they make it a little bit smaller and a different pastry.
Yeah, work to the cost rather than
work to the cost, because. And so I do think they are different. Like, I haven't eaten a pucker pie in ages. Not to say, because I don't work in a fish and chip shop no more. So, but I don't remember them being like shocking. And don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to say they were amazing either. But when you're buying a pie for 90p and a customer's buying it for £2-ish, whether it's £1.90 or £2.25, there's a lot of expectation there for a product that costs not a lot of money, and
doesn't take a lot of work.
And doesn't take a lot of work.
Really.
Any work. You just pop it in a hot box. And I was trying to think the other day, like, what can you buy for the price of a pucker pie? Like, think of going into the off license or the sweet shop. You're not going to walk away with a lot. Do you know what I mean?
Well, I think the biggest problem with that is workmen want them for lunch, but they're going to cost over £2.50, £3. So you're getting into that Tesco's meal deal price. And if you put chips and gravy as well, you're going to struggle to hit £3, and that's the magic lunch price.
It is, isn't it? I think, and also, but the lunch times, I'm not being funny, for the most part, most people's lunchtime trades have been decimated. And I think that's for a lot of reasons. It's not just Greggs. Greggs is one part of it, because obviously you can go to Greggs and you can get a lunchtime meal from £1.50 to £4.50, let's say. But I also think it's speed and convenience. And the majority of people don't work, with their hands anymore. It's not, when I first started, I think even then lunchtimes were starting to slope off a little bit when I first started. And that was year 2000. So I think that there's so many things. A lot more people work in offices. People are more diet conscious. Back in the day, people would eat in a fish and chip shop twice a day and it wouldn't faze them because they were working out on the road, or they go for a bacon butty in the morning and a fish and chips at lunch, and they go home and have a heavy meal again. But if you're not doing that work anymore, I think that's why the UK has changed a little bit in that respect, that most people in the last 25, 30 years have moved into employment that isn't physical.
Yeah, I mean, our lunch trade is just builders and old people who are having dinner for lunch, and they'll just have something small in the evening. They're not eating twice a day. They're having their dinner early in the day and just having something small in the evening, and builders. So it's still the same thing. There's just less of them.
Yeah. No, it's true. It's true. And I think so. I wonder if what you're saying is probably going to stick, what you said earlier, which is we're probably not open lunchtimes. And I wonder if that sticks for the foreseeable future. I wonder if we become a bit like the Chinese takeaways and the Indian takeaways, where we're there for the night time. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I can see my Hinkley Road shop only opening a Friday lunch and a Saturday lunch for the football. Monday to Thursday have been questionable for a long time whether it's actually worth opening. So yeah, I can see that happening. But my Syston site, we've got a big industrial estate, so it's always a busy lunch, so it's good.
You're not that close to the Leicester ground, though, are you? Or do people park there and walk in?
They park there and walk in. I'm about a 15 to 20 minute walk. So, and there's a lot of pubs, Leicester-based pubs that are on the way. So it's a bit of a beer crawl from my shop to the Leicester ground.
To be fair, though, it's not a long walk, though, is it?
No. It's a good spot and we get a lot of people on the way back as well. And on the evening kickoffs, especially, we stay open a bit later sometimes and pick that up.
So how many people did you put on furlough when all this kicked off?
Well, I was up to 22 staff, and 22 staff went on furlough.
Fair enough.
And then I pulled back most of them. I think I've got 4 or 5 people left on furlough now. One of them came off of furlough, found out she was pregnant, so was high risk and has now gone back on furlough. But it looks like, according to her midwife, she looks like she'll be able to come back. So that's a benefit. Okay. She manages their Syston shop. So,
do you think you're gonna have to keep on fast forward a year, if everything's been okay, we don't get a second wave or even a mutation? That's being very optimistic, obviously. Do you see yourself keeping the screens? Have you put screens in? Do you see yourself keeping them, or if you have put them in?
So I've not put screens in at the moment. I thought about it. And I thought I didn't want to because I don't really see the purpose of them. I think if the staff have got masks and gloves, then the screens are just a bit of a fail-safe. But now we're letting walk-ups and the odd walk-in. People keep touching the counter. So and leaning on the counter and putting their phones and their keys on the counter. So I think we are going to have to put a screen of some kind just to stop people leaning all over, because they don't like being like, we've had a few people leaning. We've got, sorry, can you just stand on the on the yellow spot on the floor? And that's not gone down very well.
Why don't you just put pigeon wire on your counter?
Yeah, barbed wire would be brilliant sometimes.
No, I think, but that's always been a thing. Like my dad used to get, when I used to work with my dad, which didn't last very long because we nearly killed each other, but he hated it if anybody so much as leant on the counter, touched it. He'd say to them, look, this isn't a leaning area. He'd say a lot worse than this. He'd say, this is where I'm going to put your food. And I remember one shift, a woman just sort of she fluffed her hair on the counter, and he went ballistic. He just said to her, look, your horse. He'd throw her out and everything.
Oh my God.
He called, honestly, my dad but then he was a different type of shopkeeper. I think anyone then would have agreed with him. That's where the times have changed a little bit. Nowadays, the customer is always right.
I can see the review on Google.
Oh yeah! How dare you tell me to get my hair off the counter?
Never going to Pete's again. That's
exactly. I could read it now. It would say, "How dare Pete tell me not to put my hair on the counter?" And people might even agree with that. Whereas back then, it was just, "No, you're thick," And I think that's how times have changed a little bit. And I think that and maybe this is the COVID pandemic is going to bring people back to that reality, that hygiene, that sense of hygiene again as well. Yes, don't put your hair on the counter, don't touch everything you don't need to touch, don't go rifling through all the forks and the spoons, and just get one, or don't give them all out. I think there's going to be some common sense coming back in as well, hopefully.
Yeah, and I think that's the main purpose of the screens for me. I'm struggling to find one so if there's any people selling screens out there, I've got a really narrow counter, so I can't find one freestanding on it. But I can't see them staying. Look, the only thing they're brilliant for is I think the customer feels better when they're there, and I think
so. It's perception.
Yeah, because I don't think they make a whole lot of difference. unless someone's directly spitting on you, it's not going to do much.
Well, you are in Leicester, Charlie.
Yeah, that was a good point.
At Mario's Chippery in the 90s, I guarantee you that probably would have happened.
Oh, yeah, I dread to think.
Yeah. So, but I know that a customer sent me a photo the other day, and he showed me a photo of someone else's staff, and they had the cloth mask on, the visor on, and they also had a screen going completely over the range and over the counter. And I just thought to myself, how are you going to work in that environment? Like, it's already hot and steamy. Like, you've now got 2 masks on, not one, and the customer, he was saying the customer can't hear the staff member.
Yeah. I've made it compulsory for the staff to wear a mask on their face, because as soon as we opened up, we tried to adhere to 2 meter distancing, and at one shop it's easy because we've got an island range, but it soon became apparent that at some point we're going to come within 2 meters of each other, and anyone who thinks they're actually going to stay 2 meters apart is lying to themselves. So within the first shift, I bought a lot of reusable masks, but I'm not sure the screens are that effective, but it's hot. It is hot working in the cloth masks even then. But the visors for me were unbearable. They were so hot, especially in this little heat wave that we've had. It's horrible.
It's amazing. My cousin lives in Cyprus. They had 41-degree heat day, and on the same day we had 19. And I was saying, so I can't cope. But he's like, it's 19. I was like, it's different over here, mate. And actually, it is. The heat is different in England, and especially when you're in a chip shop as well, like, or in a kitchen, that would be hot. Like, like Magpie Cafe, their kitchen is underneath. So if they've got aircon now, but they never used to. And I remember you'd be there before they had aircon, and because it was a basement kitchen, you'd feel the heat. It was just
mine's the kebabs. When I've got to cook kebab when it's so hot outside, that's the tough moment.
Yeah, like have you ever cooked kebabs after you've already burnt your knuckles?
Yes, horrible.
Oh,
absolutely horrendous.
God.
But I'll tell you what, the gloves have helped with that. Wearing gloves is one thing I've realised is that you burn yourself a little bit and it doesn't hurt. It just melts the glove a little bit.
So. We had an old range years ago, and I remember you'd burn yourself on when you go get chips out the chip box. You'd burn yourself on the top elements because they were really low. It was before like Karemco and all that, and you'd burn yourself every time, but it burnt your skin in a way that was horrible. Like it was like a fly killer. So the skin used to go grey and stink, and it was just vile. It was vile, and it just smelt horrible for ages. But yeah, we've got rid of that range, and now obviously not everyone, but most of my family are all on Dutch ranges now. So so. One thing I sort of wanted to focus on with you. You're a young lad, 25 years old, and what's it like managing employees? For the most part, most of your staff might be older than you. Like, how does that? Has that been a problem?
Yes and no. It was a problem to begin with. I think that one of the hardest things was when I first took over from Jan at Hinkley Road, is that all the staff knew him as the boss, and then I stepped up, and that became a problem. But at Hinkley Road, I employ a lot of students, so they come and go quite quickly. They'll last a year, maybe 2 if I'm really lucky. But I don't know. I've never struggled too much, and as much as I think I've always tried to do the right thing, and staff can see that. I'm never trying to deliberately go out and screw them over or pay them less than I want to, and I've always tried to pay fairly as well. I think that helps, even if it means that I'm earning a touch less. As long as it's still viable, it makes sense to. And I think I've always tried my hardest to learn as much as possible from other people in the industry and from my own staff. I've had staff that have worked in shops and taken on their advice, rightly or wrongly, explained my point of view on it. And I think as long as you're showing quite a bit of respect to the staff, they'll respect you back. But obviously we do have our problems, and being in the awards and things has helped hugely with that as well, because they take me seriously, in as much that I will probably know more about fish and chips than them. And when it boils down to that, they're willing to listen.
Yeah. Well, that makes sense, I suppose. So for you, you don't think it was an age thing? You think it was the fact that there was another boss before?
Yeah, I think that was the biggest problem. But I've always been quite careful who I employ. I don't tend to employ people with years and years and years of experience in a fish and chip shop, because I was well aware at 19 that chances are people aren't going to listen to me. What can I tell a 45-year-old woman with 3 kids who's been there, seen it all? I haven't seen it all, and I wouldn't pretend to know that I had. So chances are, if I'd ask certain questions at the interview, and I'd get a feel for the respect of the person to begin with. It comes back to that thing. I was told very early on, luckily, to employ from personality. So that's what I've tried to do, and it's worked out so far.
So one thing we've seen recently is sensitivities are going to be a really big thing. And one thing, I grew up in the fish and chip shops. My dad always said to me, there's 2 things we never talk about with customers: politics and religion. And at the moment, everyone is talking about all these things. Lots of everything intermingles, politics, you name it, whatever. And we spoke about it on yesterday's podcast. And I said to the lady, I says, who's does PR? I says, what would you do if one of your staff members? It was the exact thing we've been talking about recently. We've seen where a shop in Scotland, one of the staff they obviously had a discussion. The discussion, we weren't there, but let's assume didn't go the way that the guy thought it was going to go. It was about Black Lives Matters. That whole conversation for me wouldn't have happened, because I wouldn't have had that conversation with a staff member, or let alone a customer. But that conversation went the wrong way. And do you find that you don't talk about this sort of thing with customers or staff now, like that you just avoid it, even if you may agree?
Yeah, well, I think there's lessons to be learned from that. Don't discuss politics. It's a bit of a no brainer, really. But even if you feel that conversation coming up between your staff, it started coming up last week for me. The staff were talking about it because it's current affairs, and I just try to change the topic as fast as possible, because it's just never. Someone's always going to disagree with someone else, and to keep that morale there. I just avoid politics and religion. It's and if you want to get into that, well, try to get your staff to not get into that at all, because it's very difficult.
I think the problem is now, though, years ago, and this I was chatting to my dad about it, and years ago we could say, don't talk about it, and we left it there. And for the most part, nobody spoke about it out of work, because they won't text each other and talk about it. They won't, meet up each other and talk about it. Work was where they met. Whereas now you've got WhatsApp groups, Facebook groups, Twitter groups. You've got all this stuff going on. It's very easy to be offended. And it's almost like, do we need to start like guiding staff? Look, you're allowed to be involved, but you've all got to respect yourself here, like respect each other here. They may differ to you. Rather than just trying to change the subject, do we have to sort of navigate this a bit more proactively, and say, we know you're going to disagree, but can you not do it here, or at least respect each other's wishes when you're at work? And I think because I think it is going to spill over everywhere. That's
it's there's going to come to a point where someone's going to disagree with someone and ask for you to get rid of them. Because of their view, and as an owner, that's going to be really difficult, because unless it's bread and butter, racist, sexist, it's going to be difficult to.
Even so, legally, how would you approach that? Legally, how would you approach that? If you rang up your HR company and said, "Oh, I need advice. Why?" Well, 2 people disagree with each other. One has views that I don't strictly agree with, but no one wants to work with them. How would you get rid of that person? You can't, and that's the point. Like, the HR law is no way near sort of the current where we need to be. So I don't think you can get rid of someone because of their opinion. And if you do, then you're just as bad as them anyway. So what?
Yeah,
I don't know.
So it's really, but then it's going to get to the point where people might not want to work on shifts with certain people, which already happens to an extent. But it could become a blatant refusal, and that's going to be really difficult to manage in the in the next, well, this week it's going to be tough.
Yeah, I think we've just got to be careful as the society is going down this. And not to be political, but it's going down this very liberal sort of woke state. How does the employment law catch up with all of that? And I think that's going to be very tricky, and it's going to be very tricky for managers to handle that. And I almost feel like it's going to be, you could talk about whatever you want, but you do not fall out at work. You just don't. And, because work is a sacred place almost, like, and it'd be interesting how this plays out in offices, because they are very closely knit people in offices. So
yeah. A fortunate thing with us is there's always more cleaning, and there's customers.
Yeah, you can always send someone somewhere else.
Yeah. Stop talking about that. Go and clean something, please. That was my idea on Friday. You've got time to talk about that, you've got time to go and clean something.
So the minute someone says, "Oh, did you see that march yesterday?" You just shout out, "The toilets need cleaning. Yeah. There's a customer at the front."
That's going to be my policy for the next few weeks.
So with everything going on, you were saying earlier that you found that switching sort of business over to aggregators like Just Eat and so on, Deliveroo, I don't know which specific ones, you found that they've really helped you out.
Well, while COVID was going on, I did a lot of reading, and I have tried to move my business away from aggregators since reopening for COVID. And in my Syston shop, it's a village, and it's worked perfectly. We wasn't using aggregators there, so we just set up a brand new delivery service, and it's gone boom. It's been fantastic. Whereas at Hinckley Road, we've always used aggregators before, because I didn't want to use my own drivers, was the biggest thing. Didn't want to employ more people. But I saw this as an opportunity to try and move customers from aggregators to my own delivery service. And what I found out very quickly is that people don't like to move. And all the reading I've done is said that most people, if they use an aggregator, they tend to stick with that aggregator. And where I am, it's heavily student based. So I need them. I need aggregators, because a student doesn't come to Leicester for 2-3 years and buy into my brand potentially within the first 6 months. They just flick through Just Eat, they just flick through Deliveroo, they just flick through Uber. And if I've got a good rating, they'll click it. A good rating, a good photo, they'll click it. And if I don't, they won't. So that's why aggregators are so important to me. When I first reopened, we were only doing sort of 50% of the turnover, and I was really worried. And so I switched my aggregators back on, and it was quite clear that was the problem. We do double the amount on the aggregators than we do my own service. So now it's a case of trying to move them over to my own. And I use it as more of an advertising thing now. Before, I've always been on aggregators, but before I had my prices 30-35% higher. And there was a bit of an uptake, but no real volume going through it. So I've sort of changed my tact at the moment, just to try something, where my prices are pretty similar to what is on my own service, only sort of 10% higher with a different delivery charge. And because that initial high price is putting people off of buying my food in the first place. So I've not even got the chance to turn them into my own customer. I've just not got them as a customer at all. So that's what I'm going for now. Slightly cheaper on the aggregators, but slightly more expensive on the aggregators, but not so much that it's putting people off, so that I can switch them to my own customer.
How do you get, obviously, we wrote that article trying to advise people on sort of how to deal with aggregators. And how do you get past the fact that you've given away, well, you've got those as a business partner, essentially. You've given them, 13 to 37%. And, if you want to be competitive, it's a tight squeeze, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It's extremely tight. But I'm trying to look at it as more of, like I say, marketing and a chance to, if I did a half price offer and got 300, 400, 500 people through the door, I wouldn't see that as a cost. I'd see that as an opportunity to get new customers. So that's what I'm doing with my you could say that I've got a 30% offer on all the time.
Yeah.
And it brings in a lot of customers and a lot of new people trying the shop.
So essentially, you've chosen to use the aggregators as a sales funnel. So you bring them, then trying to convert them to, let's say, the Frydales app or the Frydales online service?
Yeah.
Is that the long-term?
Yeah, whether or not this works, I don't know. I've been doing it for 4 weeks, but it seems to be, we're getting busier on our own service, and aggregators still seem the same at the moment. But we'll see over the next few months how it works. But as much as you've got to watch your margins with the aggregators, right now, I need volume. And at the minute, I need a certain amount of staff to run the shop. And if I've got spare capacity, that's better filled with a customer that I'm making 30 or 40% on than no customer at all.
That makes sense. I get that. It's just interesting. I think as long as you've got a plan, that's the main thing. And I think, but you always generally do. Like, you'll text all the time. You're always, and you don't only text me. You text others, so you're constantly trying to.
Irritating. Still, I'm everywhere.
No. What I'm getting at is that you're trying your best to talk to lots of different people and glean the best advice. And doesn't mean my advice is the best. It means that what you're doing is picking out as many people's ideas as possible. And I think you can't afford not to be like that these days.
Well, there's a lot of people that have done a lot more than me and know a lot more than me. If it takes a message to them for them to potentially say no, or for me to potentially irritate them, but get an answer that will help me and help my business, I'll do it.
I'd bet you in. Sorry to butt in there, but I was going to say, like, in many cases, I bet you've helped just as much back.
Some people, and often the people that have reached out to me for help have helped me just as much as I've helped them. They'll come to me for advice, and then I'll ask something back, and they'll often know more about a certain thing than I do. Especially when it comes to like staff and things like that. A lot of people have a lot more of experience of managing staff than I do, and that really helps.
No, definitely. So what do you think, obviously, we don't know what the challenges are, but what would you say in the last sort of 6 years? A lot has changed in the industry. What do you think has changed mostly for you, would you say?
Well, for me, I've gone from a shop that competed on portions and prices that now competes on quality and knowing my profit margins and having a click. Before, I just used to open the door, hope people came in. If I made money at the end of the week, that was brilliant. And if I didn't know why as such, just hope they'd come back the next week. Whereas now it's a proper business. We've got management structures, we know all our margins, we know how we're going to get people through the door, and it gives us the chance to change things one thing at a time rather than trying to change too much. And that's been a huge learning curve. But the biggest challenges obviously have been commodity prices and the increase in minimum wage, and it just seems like a completely different business than it was even 6 years ago to try and manage and run.
Yeah, I think you're right. And like you said, the previous business model, which was just inherited, and every fish and chip shop probably does it, you're laying out a lot. You're putting on staff, you're putting out a lot of product, you're preparing all those potatoes, chips, fish, whatever. But like you say, you don't know if it's going to be busy or quiet. Whereas I suppose one benefit with moving over to like, so let's say the modern digital type business where, you've either got the aggregators or a click and collect sort of system, you sort of see all of this populating. You know exactly what you're doing, hopefully a day or two in advance. You know what to prepare, what to work towards. You still might get busier, obviously.
Well, you say a day in advance, Stel, even 15 minutes in advance is the biggest change. I didn't even realise how much it cost me to take orders. Having someone stood on the till the whole time costs a fortune compared to having them in, and knowing what someone's going to order 10 minutes before they come through the door is invaluable. Even if, I mean, you're saying days in advance. If they've not pre-ordered, even that 10 minutes makes the biggest difference.
I think Mark Drummond quite well, like I do, and one of the common themes me and him have always sort of tossed around this argument was that he never believed before this that call and collect or click and collect was worth it, and I'd say to him, well, if you knew what your customer was having before they came in and it was already paid for, would you not like that? And he was just like, well, what about the people that are waiting in the queue. And I was like, but what if they had the same opportunity to do exactly the same thing?
Yeah, I've done it for quite a while now, coming up to 2 years, click and collect, and it's never really took off. But it's always been an option because we cook to order. The wait can become quite long on a Friday. It annoys people, and especially workmen at a lunchtime. It can get quite annoying. I'm like, click and collect. You won't wait a single minute. I'll have it ready. Come and get it. And the more people we've moved over to that, it's stopped as many complaints about time. It's stopped the staff making as many mistakes because there's not the pressure of a customer watching you. And the staff are finding it so much easier because there's not a queue out the door. There's not that pressure.
Again, I think to give people a bit of enlighten them a little bit on your situation is that if you cook to order, when in Leicester, that's not normal, because me and you could walk into a chip shop, any chip shop for the most part, walk in and get our food immediately without waiting, so, and that was probably another pressure on your side where you're trying to do it fresh, cooked to order, so customers then probably get a bit more stressed with you as well for that, don't they?
That's a huge thing. It's Leicester's fill the top box up and then just hope people come
wait.
And take the wastage on the chin if it has to, or just leave it there and sell it anyway. In a lot of cases, So, but that's one thing that's meant that I can have higher prices with a smaller portion is that they're going to get a good consistent. And that was the thing. I wanted consistency, and if you fill in the top box up, nothing's consistent, and that. No. But that's created its own challenges because at my shop in the petrol station, we're limited on space. So we only have one fish pan. So it can become quite a battle cooking to order with one fish pan. But what we've done recently is we just cut one size of fish. So I'm cutting 3-ounce pieces of fish and giving 1 piece for a mini, 2 pieces for a regular, and 3 pieces for a large. And that's solved a lot of volume issues at Syston. We can keep up, and that solved a lot of the cooking to order issues. We've been able to put up a few during this for the odd walk-in that comes in, try and get them in and out quicker, and the food's staying consistent because the fish doesn't stay there, because it doesn't matter if it's a large, a regular, or a mini, you've got it there.
Yeah. And I suppose it then cuts down on waste, doesn't it?
Yeah, well, there's no waste really.
You have got a good fish supplier, though. I'm not going to lie.
Yeah, Varney's a great guy. I'd recommend Varney to anyone. He delivers all over the Midlands.
So Varney's my first cousin, as you know, and he's not as good looking as me, and he's older and a bit grumpier. And
talks just as much, though.
Say again.
I said he talks just as much, though.
Well, he loves football, though. He's a huge Leicester fan, isn't he?
Yeah, we're going well.
Yeah, he's a good lad, Varney is, and that's Central Seafoods for anybody that knows. And I think that he's good at what he does. He's a good lad, and he knows fish and chip game a lot. So if you was to say to him, I want something, he would say to you, we can do that. And I think that's the good thing about Varney. I quite like, to be honest.
Yeah, and he's really specific with the stuff that he buys. So I was on the same vessel of fish for 15 months now.
Yeah.
And he only buys fish from specific vessels, not just specific brands, specific vessels of specific brands. And he knows every single one inside out. So he's so knowledgeable.
That's good. Well, that's a compliment for him, I'd say. He is knowledgeable. He's a good guy. So let's end this because we're going to get going soon. What is next for Charlie? What would you like next? Let's fast forward. Everything's done. What is next for Charlie Collins?
Well, I'd like to do a bit better in the Fish and Chip Awards. I've made the top 20 with one of my shops once. Made top 60 this year. So I'd like to make top 10, which I think is achievable if we put out a good product in the mystery shopping round. Because that's been the biggest boost to turnover out of anything that I've done. Coming top 20 in Fish and Chip Shop of the Year.
What about Young Fish Fry? Did that help?
It helped, but on a shorter term basis. It's difficult to tell with Young Fish Fry because before we had to lock down, I was gaining some real momentum at the shop.
Yeah.
And then we locked down, so it's difficult to tell. But, so everything, all the publicity we got at the end of January, we had through February and the start of March, and it was busier. The first week after, both shops were 20% up. And that sort of settled to 10-15%, and then it was starting to climb back up to 20%, but it's difficult to tell now because COVID put a real halt in that, just as we were gaining some really nice momentum.
Yeah, it's going to be difficult to sort of get that momentum going again post-COVID, I think. And but hopefully we can, But just see yourself opening more shops, just see yourself going back down to 1 or going back up more to 3s and 4s, or is it just wait and see?
I think I'd like a third, because I think that basically my shops are at either end of a really long dual carriageway that's got several different villages down. If I can work my way down those, then I'll be able to centralise prep and all that kind of thing, and it'll be easier. But ultimately, as well, if the turnover's not there, it's not worth doing. Even if you can have 4 shops, if they're only doing a few thousand a week, it's just a lot of work for no more money. So part of me wants to concentrate on 1 and make that extremely busy, but then I quite like the idea of not having to work still. Not having to work as hard as I do with 1. If I worked in 1 Friday all the time, then I'd definitely make better money than I do now. But it's trying to find that balance. Staff at the minute need a lot of balance, and I like to have that balance as well. A lot of people say to me, "Well, I have to work 70, 80 hours a week," and well, don't and take a hit on the money. And I know that's easier said than done, but you're just going to burn yourself out and start to resent the shop. And that for me is the biggest fear, is resenting my shops. And I see a lot of people that do that now, and I don't want to become that. So I actually think a third shop might stop me resenting them in the long run, whereas 1 busy shop may grind me down slightly.
It makes sense. They're both good options. I know people that have got 1 great shop, and I know people that have got 10 great shops, and I've met people that have got 40 great shops. And I think the difference is that you have to evolve to become something else, because you can't be all to everything. You just can't. It's impossible. So I think you need to then learn to change, because, but you can also take time off with 1 shop. If you've got 1 good shop, you do not have to be there every day of the week. And you need to sort of learn to say, well, I can't do this. And if it costs you £300 a week or £400 a week for someone to come in and do a few shifts for you, but that leaves you, doesn't mean you have to sit down and do nothing. It means it gives you time to run the business from a different perspective.
Yeah. I mean, like you say, I don't know if I've currently got it in my skill set to be an operations manager of 4, 5, 6 shop, but I know at the minute I can manage 2. That's going fine. If I bumped it up to 3, it's another set of skills that I don't know if I have yet, but so we'll have to wait and see if I can get it.
At least you have the main thing you have, Charlie, is what I like about you, actually. It's like you've got the skills to recognise you don't have the skills of certain things. And I think that's a skill in itself. It's knowing your weaknesses. And I think I've been for a phase where we think we can do everything, and actually we all need to know that we can't do everything.
I'm very aware of what I'm not good at.
I get told what I'm not good at constantly. So Charlie, I just want to say thanks for your time today, mate, and we will talk again soon, no doubt.
Thank you very much, Stel. I'll see you soon.